So AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and her team are calling out Nancy Pelosi for her blatant hypocrisy in endorsing Joe Kennedy against incumbent Democratic Senator Ed Markey in the Massachusetts Senate primary. Basically, Nancy Pelosi has made such a big deal, and the Democratic Party has made such a big deal about trying to stop these primary challenges, about trying to get people to stop backing them, about getting people to not fight one another, supposedly to fight the Republicans. But what we see here is Nancy Pelosi putting her full weight behind a challenger to an incumbent Democratic member of Congress. And if she was being, fair and balanced, she wouldn't do that. But clearly, the rules are not meant to apply to Nancy Pelosi. AOC and many others have been calling her out. A lot of the relatively new progressive Congress people, including some of the new people that are going to be going in November, like Mondaire Jones, Jamal, Bowman, Cori Bush, all of them sort of did vague tweets at Nancy Pelosi, maybe not directly at her, but when this was announced, they just shared, gifs of people laughing because they know this is so Nancy Pelosi. For her to, begrudge people for primarying corporate, washed up Democrats, and then, when she has the opportunity to replace somebody with her favorite, with her preferred candidate, she takes the opportunity, which is what she's trying to do in Massachusetts. And AOC responded yesterday saying the following: "No one gets to complain about primary challenges again. So at DCCC, when can we expect you to reverse your blacklist policy against primary orgs? Because between this and the lack of care around Ilhan Omar's challenger, it seems less like a policy and more like a cherry-picking activity. Ilhan's multi-million challenge was bankrolled by DC lobbyists and dark money groups. He blatantly admitting to using shell corporations to get around the DCCC blacklist, which all but means his vendors work with the Democratic Party. Yet DCCC hasn't enforced policy. I wonder why." And basically what she's saying there is that, at least with Ilhan Omar, there wasn't a formal endorsement by Pelosi of her challenger. There wasn't the party in a formal sense lining up behind her challenger. But behind the scenes, all the work was being done to allow him to get around a lot of the rules that have been put in place to stop people from supporting primary challengers of Democrats in Congress. And they're doing that because Ilhan Omar is a progressive, and they're doing that because Ilhan Omar speaks the truth about very controversial issues regarding, let's say, Israel and Palestine, and they wanted her out of Congress. So they tried to do it in a more underhanded way. And today, and I believe this is from AOC's office, they basically said, in response to a journalistic question, "Alex, Nancy Pelosi just endorsed Ed Markey's primary challenger in the upcoming Massachusetts Senate election on September 1st. Here's why that's a double standard. Last year, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, that's the DCCC, instituted a new blacklist targeting staffers and companies who worked for primary challengers. Unsurprisingly, that overwhelmingly targeted people who worked with progressives. Now it's clear. The blacklist was never just meant to quote-unquote protect incumbents. It was meant to block progressive leaders from being elected, like Ayanna Pressley, Jamal Bowman, Cori Bush, or even Alexandria in 2018. And that's very clear. What you're seeing is that behind the scenes, and now at least occasionally via Nancy Pelosi's endorsement, the don't challenge incumbents is don't challenge neoliberal incumbents from the left. That's the understanding here. If you challenge a progressive from the right, if you win, you'll be fully welcomed in, and it doesn't look like there will be a lot of consequences for you and anyone who worked for you. That the blacklist is less of a blacklist for you and only for people that helped AOC, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, on and on and on and on. And I think that's very, very telling. And so now it's time to set an example. Now it's time to set an example to let people know that the only alternative is to keep primarying bad Democrats and to protect good or even decent Democrats from being primaried by the right. I know Ed Markey isn't perfect. I know that. I know that he's cast some bad votes. He's not a Bernie Sanders in terms of his lifelong, progressive credentials. But he's a darn good senator. And he's done some really good things working with both Bernie and AOC and other progressives. And he's certainly better than Joe Kennedy, and he should get the support of progressives. Now, a couple things I probably should note. We now know that Bernie Sanders has, at least as of yet, refused to endorse Ed Markey over Joe Kennedy. I think that's very disappointing. A lot of people are saying that maybe it's because Markey didn't endorse him for president either times. Some are also suggesting maybe that he doesn't want Bernie's endorsement because he already has a lot of left-wing endorsements. He doesn't need another one. And so maybe he wants to be able to court more moderate voters, and Bernie being on board would stop that. I'm not convinced by that. I just think it's very disappointing that Bernie isn't following the lead of the people who followed his lead, right? That, AOC and Ilhan Omar and a lot of these folks have been, making this type of endorsement. Jamal Bowman has made this type of endorsement. And now we need to see Bernie, with a lot of the people he inspired. And he's not there right now. And I do encourage him, and I hope he finds the space to do so, to endorse Ed Markey. He may not be perfect, but he's the better choice for the Senate primary in Massachusetts. So good for AOC for calling out her own party's hypocrisy. I like this trend. People sometimes tell me that AOC is too quiet on criticizing the Democrats. But yesterday I made a video where she's one of the few people that's been calling out Joe Biden's failure to live up to his own campaign promises in recent rhetoric. I think that's going to continue. And that's why I think she really is going to be the torchbearer for the next generation of progressives in electoral American politics.